The world was a blur of gray gravel and blinding sun. Sharp stones bit into my skin, scraping my knees raw as my father's hand, a vise of iron around my wrist, dragged me across the driveway. "Don't you ever block your sister's car again," he snarled, his voice a low growl that vibrated through his grip. He yanked me another few feet, my body bumping and scraping against the ground like I was nothing more than a sack of trash he was taking to the curb. I wasn't even blocking her car. I had stepped onto the porch for a single moment, just to grab a textbook I'd left outside, when she decided she had to leave that very second. Her shrill, whining voice had sliced through the quiet afternoon. "Dad, she's in the way again." That was all it took. Before I could form a sentence to explain, to defend myself, he had exploded from the house and grabbed me. From the corner of my eye, I could see my mom standing on the porch. She was a still life portrait of indifference, arms crossed over her chest, sipping her iced tea as if she were watching a mildly interesting television show. She raised her glass slightly, her voice dripping with venom. "She wants to live here for free and take up space," my mom called out, a casual observation that cut deeper than the gravel. "That trash can's finally got some use." With a final, furious shove, my dad pushed me straight into it. It was a huge, plastic city trash can, the kind that smelled of sour milk and rotting mystery meat even after it was emptied. The lid flung open on its hinge. I tumbled inside, my head hitting the hard plastic wall with a sickening thud. The lid flapped shut above me, plunging me into a dark, stinking prison with a hollow bang. The stench was a physical force, a thick, gagging cloud of old coffee grounds and discarded food. I pushed against the slimy walls, my feet slipping on something wet and sticky at the bottom. The angle was impossible, designed to keep things in, not let them out. Every attempt to get a foothold was an awkward, humiliating scramble. Outside, I could hear a sound that made my blood run cold. My sister Lena's snickering laughter. I pictured her standing there by her pristine car, wearing one of her designer sundresses, filming my struggle on her phone. "Finally, in a place that fits, huh?" she called out, her voice sharp with amusement. I was 25 years old. I had a degree in biochemistry, but no job yet, no money of my own. I was still sending out applications for entry-level research roles, staying at my parents' house for what was supposed to be a few short weeks while I tried to save up enough for a small apartment. But every single day in that house felt less like a temporary stop and more like a punishment for simply existing. There was a time, when I was much younger, that my dad had been warm, not exactly loving, but decent. He would ruffle my hair, help with a tough math problem. But then Lena turned 15, and something inside him shifted, as if a switch had been flipped. She became the sun, and I became a forgotten shadow. Everything revolved around her. Private dance school, expensive trips to France for cultural immersion, a brand new car the day she got her license. When I once asked for a new pair of sturdy shoes for a lab internship I'd landed, they had looked at me with blank faces. "Your sister needs that money for a summer intensive," my mother had said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Now it was far worse than just neglect. It was open warfare. After they finally got bored and I managed to crawl out of the trash can, covered in filth, I locked myself in my small basement room. The single bare light bulb buzzed overhead, a lonely, irritating sound in the crushing silence. I wanted to scream, to cry, to smash something, but I just sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, perfectly still. A quiet, boiling rage was building inside me, hot and dangerous. I didn't go up for dinner. I ignored the hunger gnawing at my stomach. Around 11 o'clock that night, there was a sharp knock on the door. Not a gentle, concerned knock, but a hard, impatient one. "You going to stay down there and sulk, or are you going to clean up that trash you left all over the driveway?" My mom's voice called through the wood. I opened the door. Her face was a mask of contempt, her eyes cold. She tapped a long fingernail against the side of her glass. "You know what you are," she said, her voice low and even. "You're a leech with a fake education. Lena's building something real. You just stink up our space." She turned and walked away before I could find my voice to answer. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. They were gone. My dad had left a short, curt note on the fridge, held up by a magnet shaped like a cartoon lemon. "Road trip with Lena. Gone for the week. Don't mess up the house." I could have used that week to leave, to escape, but where would I go? I checked my bank account online. I had $93. No job offers had come in. I called the one friend I had left. In town, Cassie, but the call went straight to voicemail. The last time we had talked, my mom had humiliated her on our porch, loudly commenting on her second-hand clothes and making sure Cassie knew she was bringing poor girl vibes to the neighborhood. I couldn't blame her for not wanting to get involved. Then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Lena. It was a photo of my single suitcase sitting alone on the curb at the end of our street. The caption read, "Oops, took a detour. Hope you like the new view." My heart seized. I ran outside, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The suitcase was gone. Just an empty space on the grass where my life had been packed. As I stood there, shaking, my phone started buzzing again. It was my dad. I answered, my hand trembling. "We dropped your stuff off," he said, his voice completely flat, as if he were confirming a delivery time. "You'll find it at the 91st Street Shelter in Ashland. Best start learning how the world really works. Let's see how you survive now." The call ended. I stood barefoot on the porch, the morning air cold on my skin. My chest felt like it was caving in, collapsing under an unbearable weight. Ashland was 300 miles away. They had actually done it. They had driven 300 miles just to dump my belongings and abandon me. They had left me in their house without my clothes, without my ID, without my keys. They had taken everything. My laptop with all my research notes, my textbooks, even my worn-out backpack that had been with me through college. It was all gone. And the only sound I could hear was my mom's voice echoing in my head. "You just stink up our space," something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, chaotic break, but a quiet, clean one. The boiling rage cooled into something solid and sharp. Purpose. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up straight, walked off the porch, and went next door to the neighbor's house. Mrs. Talia, a kind elderly woman who always asked me about my biochemistry studies with genuine interest, opened the door. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw the state I was in. "Sweetheart, what on earth happened to you?" I didn't lie. I didn't soften the story. I told her everything. When I finished, she didn't offer pity. She just nodded slowly, her expression grim. "Well," she said, her voice firm, "I think it's about time someone taught them how survival actually works." She disappeared into her house for a moment and came back with $40 and a small business card. "This is my nephew, Malik. He runs a vintage restoration shop 2 towns over. Call him, he owes me a favor. You're smarter than they'll ever be, child. Don't you forget that." I looked down at the crisp bills and the simple card in my hand. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like trash. I felt like something was finally beginning. The first few weeks at Malik's restoration shop were brutal. My life became a cycle of sawdust and turpentine. I swept thick layers of wood shavings from the floors, sanded antique bedposts until my fingers were raw and bleeding, and helped haul vintage armoires that felt heavier than my own body. But through it all, Malik never raised his voice. He was a man of few words. He watched, he listened, and he showed me how to work with my hands. When I finally handed him the reupholstered bench I'd spent 2 straight days working on, my stitches uneven but strong, he simply nodded. "You've got grit," he said, running a hand over the fabric. "And that's rarer than talent." He couldn't have known what those simple words meant to me. I hadn't heard anything that even sounded like praise in years. I used the tiny stipend he gave me to buy a used burner phone and 1 change of clothes from a thrift store. I slept on a dusty cot in the back room of the shop, surrounded by the ghosts of old furniture. I kept my head down, and I worked. Every night, after the shop closed, I sat under a single dim bulb and read everything I could find about design specifications, wood staining techniques, and furniture history. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. By the 3rd month, Malik trusted me enough to hand me a client of my own. She was a wealthy widow who wanted her late husband's beloved roll-top desk restored. It was a beautiful, intricate piece, but it was badly damaged. I poured my soul into that desk. When the widow saw the final result, her eyes filled with tears. "I haven't seen it shine like this since our wedding day," she whispered, running her fingers gently across the polished oak surface. She paid me in cash, an envelope filled with more money than I'd made in the last 2 months combined. I stood in the alleyway behind the shop, holding that envelope, breathing in the cold, crisp air. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. All this time, my family hadn't called once. Not a single text. Not to ask if I was safe, not to see if I was alive, not even to gloat. They had completely written me off, erased me from their lives like a bad debt. They were free to continue their perfect performance for the world. But I hadn't forgotten them. One night, fueled by a dark curiosity, I Googled Lena. Of course, she had a public Instagram account. Her latest photo was a lavish picnic set up in our old backyard. There were champagne flutes, a gourmet spread of food, and Lena smiling at the camera. The caption read, "When dead weight finally disappears, life tastes like rose." The rage I thought I had buried came roaring back. But this time, it didn't come with chaos. It came with crystal clarity. They were celebrating my disappearance. They were flaunting the fact that they had abandoned me. At that moment, I made a new decision. I wouldn't just survive. I would eclipse them. I enrolled in night classes at a community college, grinding my way toward a second degree, this one, in carpentry and design. By the second year, I had opened my own little shop on Etsy. I sold reclaimed furniture, offered full restorations, and took on custom pieces. To my surprise, people loved my work. Within a few months, I had clients from all over the state. Interior designers, real estate stagers, even a few set decorators for local theater productions. My name began to get around. Not the name they gave me, but the one I had given myself, Jew Hart. No one knew where I'd come from. No one needed to know. That all changed one afternoon when a familiar last name popped up in my professional email inbox. Martha Brenton. My mother. She had no idea she was emailing me. The subject line read, "Inquiry for custom dining table. Urgent." I almost laughed out loud. She needed a custom piece for a big real estate gala Lena was hosting in our old backyard. It was a fundraiser, and she needed a statement centerpiece to impress her guests. Her email said she was looking for a designer with grit and an authentic vision. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I took the job, and I made sure my quote was double my usual rate. They accepted without even blinking. The delivery day arrived. I hired a driver. I wasn't going to go myself, but I included a letter, folded neatly and placed under the table's stunning glass centerpiece. It was a letter that only they would understand. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It wasn't filled with rage. It was just the truth. "You dragged me across the driveway like I was nothing," it read, "but I turned your driveway into my launching point. This table is the only piece of me you'll ever be able to afford again. Rue Hart." The table itself was my real message. I had spent weeks designing it, with delicate, almost invisible carvings etched into the wood along the underside. They were silent and hidden, but perfectly readable if you knew to look close enough. The carvings spelled out a sentence, "Dead weight floats when you're made of stone." I heard later from Malik, who had agreed to oversee the delivery. For me, that Lena had nearly fainted when she found the message and read the letter. My mom, apparently, locked herself in her room during the entire gala and refused to come out. And my dad, he had stormed out of his own event, yelling about traitors and ungrateful people in front of more than 30 of their most important guests. It was perfect, but I wasn't done yet. I had one final move to make. And I knew they would never see it coming. The following winter, I received a letter in the mail. It came in a cheap, plain envelope with no return address, sealed unevenly. Inside was a real estate flyer with a photo of my childhood home. A bright red banner was printed across the top, "Foreclosure pending." I stared at the image of the worn-out shutters, the same ones I used to have to paint every single summer while my dad shouted corrections at me from his lawn chair. That house had been their temple, the altar where they had sacrificed me to maintain their perfect image, and now, they were losing it. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh, but a deep, profound stillness settled over me. A week later, Malik sat across from me at the shop, sipping his tea while I sanded down a walnut table. "You're going to help them, aren't you?" he asked quietly, as if he already knew the answer. "No," I said, not looking up from my work. "I'm going to give them one last thing to cherish." The auction day came quickly. I didn't go. Instead, I sent someone else. It was a young couple I had helped a few months earlier. Their small home had been badly damaged in a storm, and I had restored their ruined furniture for free when no one else would touch it. They had just had a baby and were struggling but were genuinely kind people. They went to the auction in my place, with my money. And when the auctioneer's gavel fell for the final time, they had won. The house, my prison, was no longer in my family's name. But that wasn't revenge. That was just setting the stage. The real revenge was what I did next. I asked the young couple to wait just 2 weeks before moving in. Then, I had invitations printed on fine, embossed cardstock. They read, "Open House Celebration. A new beginning for 27 Burwood Drive." I hand-delivered one to my parents' new, much smaller rental address. I hand-delivered another one to Lena's apartment. Then I waited. On the day of the open house, I stood across the street, hidden behind a large hedge. I watched as their car pulled up. I could only imagine what they were thinking. Maybe it was a chance for a reconciliation. Maybe I had bought the house back for them as some kind of apology party. Maybe they thought it was their chance to reclaim what they had lost. Instead, they were greeted by a large, handmade wooden sign I had carved myself and placed in the middle of the lawn. It read, "This home was rebuilt with grace, not guilt." The young couple came out onto the porch, holding their baby, and welcomed my family with warm, genuine smiles. "You must be here for Rue," the young woman said, her eyes soft but her voice steady. "She gave us everything." My father's face fell. My mother just blinked, as if she were trying to wake up from a confusing dream. Lena's face turned a deep, blotchy red with confusion and anger. That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the hedge. I wore no makeup, no designer clothes. I was in my work overalls, my stained leather gloves still on, holding a clipboard. They froze, staring at me as if I were a ghost. "Why?" My dad finally barked, his voice cracking. "After everything, you gave them the house." "Yes," I said, my voice calm and even as I walked toward them. "After everything. I gave it to someone who would never use the kitchen counter to try and smash my head against it. Who would never scream insults at me from the top of the staircase. Who would never drag their child across the gravel just to prove they could." Lena stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said simply. "This makes me free." She scoffed, a bitter, ugly sound. "You could have helped us. You should have. You were our daughter." I let a small faint smile touch my lips. "You threw your daughter in a trash can," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the lawn. "You don't get to act shocked when she becomes recyclable." They left without another word. But before they drove away, I handed them one last thing. It was a small wooden box, simple but polished to a beautiful sheen. My final piece of craftsmanship for them. Inside was a single crushed soda can, the old, grainy photo Lena had taken of me in the trash can with my knees bloody, and a short, handwritten note. It read, "You taught me what worthlessness looks like, so I gave it back to you." I never saw them again after that day. But once, maybe a year later, I received an email from a strange address, asking for a furniture commission. The phrasing was familiar. It was Lena. I declined the job and blocked the address without a reply. Now, I build custom pieces for people who understand value, not just price. I use my own name, my own hands, and my own stories. I don't work for revenge anymore. I work because I survived the fire they tried to destroy me in, and I learned how to make something beautiful from the broken, discarded wood they left behind.